Hey, this is Chris with LakeHub. I just wanted to cover some questions that we receive all the time from our clients through our social media pages, through our lake online guides about purchasing property on lakes in Texas. There's so many things that you need to know if you're considering going out and purchasing property, lakefront property as a second home, maybe as your primary home with all this COVID, people being able to work from home, doing school from home. A lot of people are moving out to the lakes and wanting to be on the water, are buying properties and living there full time, telecommuting and doing school remotely. So here are some things to consider when you're going out and buying your lakefront property. The first thing you need to consider is what are the God-made things that you cannot change, like the view, the water depth, the topography, and how much of that land do you actually own and can use. So many of the lakes in Texas, you might be able to own all the way under the water to where the next property line starts in the middle of the lake. Some lakes in Texas, there's a 30-foot from the shoreline all the way back, there's a 30-foot easement that the lake owns, and you might be able to use that, but you never own that. If they wanted to cut it back, if they wanted to change it, you have no control over that. Also, the water depth is extremely important, especially if they allow docks. You don't want to be on a part of a lake that drains, like the water level gets real low, or you can't put your boat in because it's only a foot of water in the wintertime. So make sure you understand, the view, the water depth, the topography. Make sure you understand that those things you cannot change. Now you go to the man-made things, which is docks, right? So, and your house, of course. A lot of people spend most of their time on the type of house that they're going to get. And they don't spend a lot of time on the God-made things. So when you finally get to your house and let's say you want a dock, some lakes don't allow docks in Texas. So make sure that if you want a dock, you want to put your boat, either a boathouse or a lift, you got to check with the either Texas Parks and Wildlife or the Brazos River Authority, depending on who manages. There's about 5 different city organizations that manage lakes here in Texas. You got to check with them to see if docks are allowed. Are you allowed to have a lift? Are you allowed to have electricity out there? Are you allowed to have a boathouse? Is it be a floating dock, or does it have to be a fixed dock? All those stuff come into play, especially depending on how the water of the lake is managed. The last thing you need to really think about is what's the type of dam, because there's only one natural lake in the whole state of Texas, and that's Lake Caddo. The rest of them are all man-made. So every one of them has a dam. Does that dam have a spillway? And if that dam has a spillway, then there's less likely for the lake properties to flood. So if the spillway basically is if the water gets to the top of the dam, on a heavy flood year or a heavy rain year, the water is just going to flow off automatically. A lot of lakes are actively managed. Is your lake actively managed? Is the dam, do the people operating the dam, do they turn it on to let out the extra water, or do they just let it fill up? You need to know that as well. That also comes to my next thing to think about is your flood insurance. When we're living on land and you're living in a city or urban area, you don't have to worry about flood insurance most of the time. But when you're living out next to a lake, a big body of water, yes, you'll have to learn about that. When you're out, the more rural you are and you're buying property on the lake, a lot of times they don't have like the 3D topographical maps that they do in a more urban area. So if you are buying in a more rural lake, just understand that a lot of times the insurance companies just make a guess. So if they guess, I've had people at lakes buy lake property, and they bought a house that was like 2 feet from the water line. And the insurance company saw that and they said, oh, we're going to tack on flood insurance for you. So they went out, they hired a surveyor, came out and did a full topographical study and sent it to them, and they had their flood insurance removed because the house was high enough that they didn't have to worry about it flooding. So that's something to consider when you're rural. When you're in a more urban setting where there's some lakes, you might not have a choice. They might already have all the 3D mapping, and they're going to define right away whether that's going to be a flood zone or not a flood zone. And believe me, flood zone insurance is a lot more expensive than not having flood zone insurance. So again, just make sure you focus on the God-made things first, focus on the man-made things next, then understand what type of dams are there and whether there's a spillway or not, and then also consider whether you're going to have to get flood insurance or not. This is Chris. Again, I'm also a licensed realtor in the state of Texas. A lot of this information came from V, our fantastic real estate agent out at Possum Kingdom Lake. Her link's for her website's gonna be at the bottom. Also come to LakeHub.com, go visit our lakes. Every one of our lakes have real estate listings, so you can go find the right property that's for you and your family.